Welcome back. We now turn in the second of our series of 4 videos to Archaic Age, which is the one that in fact probably matters the most for the development of Athenian stage drama. So we're now looking at the period 800 to 480 BC. Now, Archaic in this case refers to the earliest period in which ancient Greece is now occupied by polis. I will write that word for you so you can see it. So the polis, P-O-L-I-S, is the singular. Poleis, P-O-L-E-I-S, is the plural. And the polis in ancient Greek society, again, this will be discussed more in a later video, is the essential political unit, and the word political comes from it in English. It's the ancient Greek city-state, of which Athens is one, and probably the one that ends up mattering the most for our later reconstruction of ancient Greek civilization. So in the Archaic period, the polis gradually became developed, and by a little bit after 800 BC, most of the polis that we know of were fully established and were beginning to establish themselves in their territories around them. So for instance, Sparta, which is in southeast Greece, had a form of government that was attributed to their legendary founder named Lycurgus. And as they developed their very martial militaristic society, they gradually tried to expand northward and picked up some allies up there. They actually had a couple of wars with Argos and with Tegea up there, and they ended up taking Mantinea into its allied network. And then most importantly, the Spartans expanded west into the southwest area called Messenia. And on your map, you'll find the place called Pylos, P-Y-L-O-S. That's, in fact, a key area down there that it marks the area that the Spartans occupied. So the Spartans had that territory, and they, for most of the period that we're referring to, they had a pretty solid hold on the Peloponnesus as an allied network. The exception was the central part of the Peloponnesus, which was Arcadia. That was separate from Sparta. But most of the other, and also the other exception is Argos. Argos remained outside Spartan influence as its own independent city. But most of the other areas, except for those two of the Peloponnesus, are under Spartan control. And a couple of other further away cities, such as Corinth, at times Megara, and further north Thebes, also are allied with Sparta. Argos is a polis, Corinth is a polis, and then of course Athens. Athens, up in the area called Attica, has its own area of influence. So Athens was not as supremely powerful as it would come to be in the classical period, but the polis was advancing. Athens went through quite a few changes of government in this relatively long period. It was still a king period down to the year 684 BC. Then a new leader called an archon took over. There were 9 of them all together that they were elected annually. And we have to go all the way down to the very late 500s BC before we have Athens becoming a democracy. So this is all in the Archaic period. And the conclusion of the Archaic period for our purposes is the Persian War period, in which Athens, because of its great assistance in triumphing over the Persians, ends up rising to a form of political supremacy that will end up mattering a big time in the classical period. So the Archaic period, again, is the period in which Athens is recovering, and the other polis are recovering from the period from much before that. After Minos and Mycenae disappeared in the 1100 BC area, there was a long Dark Age period for about 100 to 200 years, and then gradually we see archaeologically a lot more new artwork and very slowly forms of literature coming into place, and gradually the formation of these new polis. So by the time you get to the Archaic period, those polis are getting going. And as the Archaic age proceeds, we see a great deal more innovation in art, literature, architecture, and gradually society in itself down through these centuries. Okay, so that's the Archaic period, and I will say that for comedy, one of the big points in which we theater for the Athenians really gets galvanized is the tyranny that's in this period, and specifically in the 500s BC. The name of the tyrant is Pisistratus, And it was under him that apparently, if we could believe our sources, which are a little shadowy, that apparently the Athenians really got going with stage drama. So comedy probably got its roots right about that period. As you saw in our video about stage drama, comedy was rooted together with tragedy in the celebrations, worships of Dionysus. So probably in this period when the city of Athens really reaches an economic acme under Pisistratus, that's when we can see stage drama getting going. Okay, so now we come to classical, in which we see comedy itself really getting going down into the period of Aristophanes in the late 400s BC. Okay, we'll see you next video on the classical period.